What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason and Joe here. Today, we're going to talk about some of our favorite albums of the year so far. So, this year, we're doing something a little different. You may remember a few months ago, we already did a best of the year so far. So, we've been going by quarters instead of just the midway check in. So, the albums that we're going to spend time talking about today are all from April through the end of June, but we will remind you quickly of what those records we talked about in the first video were. And if you want to go hear more about them or why we like them so much, you can go check out that video. We'll link it below.
All right, first quarter of the year was pretty strong. I had a couple 4.5s. I had Coming Home from Usher, controversial pick from me, of course, but really liked it. Invincible Shield from Judas Priest, Wall of Eyes from The Smile, Illion from Slift. I had Cowboy Carter, of course, from Beyonce, Bite Down from Rosalie. I had Prelude to Ecstasy from The Last Dinner Party, Plastic Death from Glass Beach, Two Star and the Dream Police from McGee, not MKG, like I may have said before, and Tyla's self-titled.
All right. Yeah, we had none in common the first quarter of the year. In no particular order, I had Bright Future by Adrian Lenker, Driftless Girl by Grey Delisle, Plunge by Sam Evian, Harm's Way by Ducks Ltd, It's Sorted by Cheek Face, Where We've Been, Where We Go From Here by Freako, New Lost Ages by Tyler Ramsey, El Magnifico by Ed Harcourt, and how many is that? I also had Too Hot to Sleep by Daniel Romano's Outfit and the self-titled R.I.P. Dunes. So none in common. I think, though, knowing what I know about some things you've said, knowing that you've said some things about certain records in this next quarter, I think there's maybe up to 4 in common this time. I think we might be lining up a little. So we'll go back and forth one at a time.
Sure.
All right. No particular order again, but what you got?
I'm gonna go Nolan Potter, which you might have on your list too. That'll be my guess. The Perils of Being Trapped Inside a Head. And this one, it's 60s and 70s influenced. It reminds me a little bit, just a little bit, of the Lemon Twigs, more like songs from the general public era. A lot of weirdness, a lot of non sequitur guitar lines that spiral off into nowhere. I heard someone say it sounds like Frank Zappa, which I can kind of see. I hear like Zappa, but there's also like ELO, and then he'll just bust into like this sweet Clapton-esque guitar solo. There's some Beatles-y stuff, some Brian Wilson-y stuff. There's some Blue Oyster Cult stuff. It's just this mishmash of like all these great old bands, but like it has that weirdness and modernity to it that makes it not sound like just, a pastiche or a tribute band. Like it's very much his own stuff, which I like, but it has all the stuff that I like from the 60s and 70s as well.
All right, yeah, I might as well talk about that now as well because that is on my list. The Nolan Potter. It's yeah, it's similar to the Lemon Twigs in that it's pulling a lot from the 60s and 70s. I think it's a lot more psychedelic than the Lemon Twigs are. But yeah, it's great guitar work on it. Really cool guitar playing throughout. And I like the way it blends the guitar with the keys, the synths and the organs. It just creates a really some really cool textures. Like you said, a lot of those 60s and 70s sounds coming in. The Mold That Grows on Harvey sounds like early Pink Floyd to me, kind of like a Syd Barrett tune. The closing track especially sounds a lot like mid 70s Todd, like Initiation era to me as well. A lot of Todd influence on there, I think. Yeah, just cool if you're into that kind of like retro psychedelic rock. That's definitely one of the better of the year so far.
I'm gonna go with Lucky Day and his album Algorithm. And this one, just listened to it maybe last week. Really strong. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Miguel and Frank Ocean before he went lame. Strong R&B. It's versed in both past and current sounds though. It doesn't sound like a throwback. It doesn't sound like he's just, redoing the 70s like some R&B acts. Like he has a very modern voice. He uses it um in the modern style of things. You're not going to say like, oh, is this guy from the 60s? Is this guy from the 70s? No. Very modern, but great production, huge bass lines all over the place. But it's really poppy and it has the melodies that you'd expect from like classic R&B. Like it's not blippy and bleepy and kind of sad and emotional like you get with some current R&B. It's very strong, just old-fashioned R&B that sounds modern. So it's the best of everything to me.
Well, next I might as well just talk about A Dream Is All We Know by the Lemon Twigs. Get that out of the way. We all know that that was gonna be on my list. Yeah, I think the Daddario brothers have just kind of like perfected their 60s pop emulation here. It's just great, catchy melodies, great harmonies, great arranging. It sounds great. It was recorded entirely analog, mixed analog. So yeah, just doing their thing. Again, like the Nolan Potter, if you like the sound of the 60s and the 70s rock and pop, yeah, definitely check it out. I would imagine most people watching are already aware of this one at least. So yeah, don't miss it.
Yeah, I'll talk about that one too. The only bad thing I can really say about it is that sometimes it's just too perfect. Like it's disconcertingly perfect at times where you actually get lost. And like at one point I was listening to the one that sounds like the birds. It's just like, is this the birds? Like who am I even listening to anymore? And I mean that's how good it sounds. That's how good their songwriting is. It's captures the Beatles and the Beach Boys and the birds and the zombies and all that great British invasion stuff. And yeah, it's almost unfair that it sounds so good. And it's the only bad thing I could say about it.
Okay, getting back to another one that I think you might have. We reviewed this earlier on the channel. I have Only God Was Above Us by Vampire Weekend. Yeah, the record before this, Father of the Bride, I think was a slight departure for them, a little different, trying out some different sounds. I think this gets back to playing to their strengths. They go back, lean back heavily into the Baroque sounds and like some of the world beat elements and the great melodies. And I think Ezra's lyrics on this are really sharp and it's everything you want from Vampire Weekend. And I didn't think the last record was bad by any means, but this just feels like them getting back to who they are, and it's great.
Yeah, it's on my list too. And I barely know what Vampire Weekend is supposed to sound like. I I've heard all their albums, but they really never connected. I like some of their songs. But this one, I is probably my favorite, to be honest. To me, it doesn't sound as annoyingly cutesy and try hard as the other one. Maybe Ezra's grown up a little bit. The music has always been good, but I never got a connection with Ezra as a songwriter. But I think it works really well here. There's some jazzy stuff. There's some strings and Baroque stuff and a little bit of 80s stuff. Really great guitar throughout. Love the single note arpeggios all over the place. Some great bass lines. And just some really strong melodies and strong hooks and good songs.
I think there's one more that we might have in common, but I will save that for a little bit. And right now, I will talk about Revelator by Phosphorescent. This is another artist that I kind of just figured was starting their downward trajectory after the last record. But then he just comes back with one of the best Phosphorescent albums. I think it's some of the finest songwriting I've heard this year. Matthew Houck's voice just has like this inherent sadness in it that I think really makes the songs hit extra hard. And yeah, they just cut right to the bone. The arrangements are gorgeous. Everyone playing on it is crushing it. I didn't look up who all the players were, but yeah, it sounds fantastic. And yeah, as far as like songwriting purely, yeah, I don't know that I've heard much this year that's better.
Okie dokie. That one's not on my list. A rare. rare one, but I did like it, I guess. I'll do This Ain't the Way You Go Out by Lucy Rose on my list. I don't know, it's nothing revolutionary. None of these albums really are, but it's just very tuneful. A lot of Joni Mitchell influence, a lot of like Carole King, and then a lot of like 90s Fiona Apple. Gets a little slinky on here as well. She's got a great voice. She's a great piano player. A touch of R&B here and there, a little bit from the 90s. And yeah, just really like all the songs.
You might have this one, I think, possibly. I have Outros Fios by Chico Bernardes. I think I'm saying that. I was saying Bernardes before when I was talking about his brother, Tim Bernardes, but I heard him say it Bernardes. And I was saying Chico, but he kind of rolls through it. I think it's Chico or something like that. I'm not sure what the Portuguese pronunciation is, but I've been obsessed, mildly obsessed with Tim Bernard since I discovered his band Uterno in 2019. That record from them just blew my mind. And then he put out a solo record in 2022 that made my top 10 of the year that year. And I had no idea of Shiku's existence until I saw this record pop up in the new releases just like 2 weeks ago. And yeah, it turns out that both brothers just make like this timeless Brazilian pop music, magnificent strings, great piano playing on this, soaring melodies. I think this record is slightly less retro leaning than Tim's stuff. I think it's a little bit more modern, but I wouldn't say it's like a modern pop record. It still sounds very classic, and yeah, it's just amazing.
All right, yep. It's on my list too. I think it's really good. I don't understand any of it because it's not in English. I didn't look up the lyrics, but that doesn't really matter when the music sounds this good, this like pure. Um, it's just, yeah, like you said, it's like timeless sounding folk music. Reminded me a little bit of like Artaud from Pescado Rabioso, like that feeling, like that, folk, but not really stripped down folk, lush lush folk, and he's got a great voice, and he's a great guitar player and pianist and all the, or maybe he's a pianist. I don't know. Whatever is going on this album, it all sounds great. Everyone's playing excellently. So yeah, a really good non-English speaking album.
Next, I'll go with New Age Rage by Eric Slick. He is the drummer of Dr. Dog. Had him on the channel, a little interview with him. A drummer going solo doesn't usually carry much expectation with it, but I think over the course of several albums now, Eric's really grown as a writer and as a singer and performer. And I think, I thought on his last record things had like fully come together and we had figured out like, okay, this is Eric Slick, this is who he is. And then he just takes it like 5 steps further on this record. So many ideas here. He's pulling influences from everywhere, from the 70s and 80s especially probably, and makes it all really work well together. It's really fun, it's upbeat, it's danceable, sonically exciting, a lot of things happening, a little maximalist, and yeah, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, can't recommend it enough. A little bit of an outlier among all of my other picks, as it's a little bit more of a party kind of record.
Right? I like that one too. Not on my list. On my list, I got Saint Vincent, All Born Screaming. And I believe we reviewed this on the channel, correct?
Yes.
It's been a while. It's a very good St. Vincent album, and I've been waiting for a very good St. Vincent album since St. Vincent from 2014. And this one has more of that feel to me. Still could use a little more guitar. She's an amazing guitarist. Need more guitar. But I think song-wise, um, Mass Seduction felt a little forced. Obviously, My Mortal Enemy produced it, so that did not help. Um, and then on what was the next one called? Daddy's Home. Again, she decides to go with Jack Antonoff to make a 70s pastiche, and it doesn't work for me. But here, All Born Screaming sounds more like Annie Clark songs. Like they're weird, but they have the hooks, but they're also a little unsettling and uncomfortable. And I don't know. To me, it just works. It sounds like St. Vincent how I want her to sound, and not like what Jack Antonoff wants her to sound like.
All right. Next for me, I'm gonna go with the record "Name Your Sorrow" by Pillow Queens, all-female Irish rock band, and I think this is just such a killer rock record. It's I guess would be considered like indie rock, but it's not small or precious at all. The sound is massive. I think built to fill stadiums. It's just layers and layers of guitar, and the guitar tones are fantastic. It just like feel like a warm blanket covering you. They've got two lead vocalists who I think work really well together, almost seamlessly, where actually the first time I listened to it, I didn't realize it was different people kind of coming in and out. And yeah, the songs are really emotional and raw. And yeah, I think it's the best record of this type I've heard this year. It is just great.
I don't think I listened to that one. I might have. I don't remember. Didn't write it down if I did. Another one on my list, however, and this is the big one. This is the one that's going to win every single album of the year. Ridiculous high scored on Metacritic. I am going with Brat from Charlie XCX, and I probably listened to it more than any other album this year, probably 7, 8 times. It's great. Every time I listen to it, I like it more. And I feel like this is finally fulfilling the promise of Charlie XCX, at least to me. 2014, Boom Crash and everything. Like she was writing songs for Iconopop, and she just seemed like she was going to be the next big thing. And she kind of went off on her little hyper pop, detour, and obviously had the critical acclaim. And people like that. If you like hyper pop, she was kind of right in the thick of things. But to me, it just never quite worked. Hyperpop's too annoying to be like a legitimate genre. And here, I think finally she pulls it back enough. Crash, she kind of went in the total pop direction. Here, she's finally balancing like the hyperpop world and the pop world and pushing pop forward. They're just really catchy. Just, I don't know. There's something about these songs. Von Dutch, 360, Apple, Talk Talk, Sympathy is a Knife. These are all songs I've added to my playlist for the year. She sounds like more real and more British. She's not like completely lost in effects, but she uses them enough to make it interesting. And I think it's the best pop album I've heard in quite a while, I'd say. Not a 10 out of 10, Fantano, but still very good.
All right, next up for me, I'm gonna go with the record "Duck" by Wayy Dynamic, and they are a band from Melbourne. And the record is produced by Stephen Blair, who's in a band called Good Morning, who also have a pretty good record out this year. A lot of the, I think, classic pop influences that I often gravitate towards, things like Todd and the Beach Boys, um, coming through here, but also there's a little jazziness and smoothness on here that kind of recalls maybe a little Steely Dan, maybe a little Michael McDonald era Doobies. And that is all taken and kind of filtered through a more modern bedroom pop aesthetic. Little bits of Mac DeMarco in there as well. Super, super dry drum sounds. I like the production a lot. I think it sounds cool. And the songs are fantastic. I think I haven't heard anyone talk about this record, but it's excellent and one that people should check out.
Sounds intriguing. So you name checking people that I want to hear. All right, I will talk about one that I think is pretty far removed from what we normally talk about. I'm gonna go "Funeral for Justice" by Madhu Mokhtar. His last album, Afrique Victime, I think was a pretty big hit and opened some eyes. And "Funeral for Justice," the new one, to me. I like it more because the guitar work is just incendiary. Yes, it earns the rare incendiary from me. Just incredible playing. It's in a style that isn't very familiar at all. It's Torog, I believe is what it's called. They say desert blues and psychedelic and whatever. It's world music that I've literally like no connection to at all. But I think it's universal sounding. Again, I don't know what he's saying. I didn't look at the lyrics, but it's like Jimi Hendrix, from out of Nigeria, and it's just a completely new sounding type of playing that is just, it's just amazing, and I love it. And I could just listen to him play guitar all day.
Okay, next up for me is the record Lurleen by Warren Tin. This is the project of LA-based artist Warren Hayatt. He's this young up-and-comer, and he records in like a shed in his like in the back of his house, and he's real into analog stuff. And he says if he can't play it, he can't lay it. So uh, I'm into that idea. He's got a bit of a wild persona. He puts on these chaotic shows. But I think all of that kind of masks the real depth of the music. I think the songs are really, really good. A little lo-fi, a little psych, a little bedroom pop. But then he's also able to cut through with songs like Kid Changed and the title track Lurleen, which, just come through the haze with such directness, a little bit of Americana in those tunes. And yeah, I just think he's really talented, and I think he will go on to do great things.
My number 10, we go with Fabiana Paladino's self-titled Daughter of Bass Legend, Pino Palladino. This album has taken years to come to fruition. She's recording it for a while now, and she's sort of been lying in wait, waiting to unleash. But I think it's worth the wait. It's a really strong update of late 80s pop and R&B. There's some Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis type production on here, the synths. Can You Look in the Mirror? There's a little bit of Prince. There's some stuff that kind of sounds like Carly Rae Jepsen's version of the 80s. Songs like I Can't Dream Anymore and Give Me a Sign. But it's very smooth. It's very icy, kind of funky, and it's 80s sounding without being like too 80s. There's definitely enough of her own personality and her own ideas on here. And yeah, I just think it's really good songwriting, great singing, great production.
All right, last one for me is the album Make It Up by the band Feet. This one was produced by Andy Savers, who did the first Black Country New Road record, but don't be scared, Joe. It's not very post-punk or whatever the Black Country New Road are. This is more straight up indie rock, leaning heavily on like power pop influences. The vocal delivery on the track "The Real Thing" reminds me a lot of Big Audio Dynamite era Mick Jones, and the guitars at times can be a little jagged and angular, but never at the expense of tunefulness. And it's just some of the catchiest, most fun rock music of the year so far. Great hooks and good energy. So those are our favorites of quarter 2. You'll have to tune in at the end of the year to see how they stack up against the quarter 1 records that we talked about. Excited for the rest of the year to come. I think it's going to turn out to be a good one. I think we're already heading in a good direction. Let us know what your favorites of the year so far are from any of the first 6 months, if you're inclined to. Hit like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, check the video description. We'll link to the other video, as well as have links to our Patreon and merch and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.